Thank you, Bob, and good morning, everyone. I want to begin my talk this morning by reading a poem I call Prologue. It sets the scene in my living room, where I found myself 15 months ago, recently widowed and learning how to live alone. There were times when I was scared. I had begun to wonder who I was and how I could possibly keep on living. Not only had I lost my husband of 56 years, but I'd also just lost my sister. I had no children. I didn't know how I could construct a vibrant social life again. The poem describes what was on my mind as the pandemic began. You need time for processing, time for staring out the window, turning off the noise, the TV, the radio, sitting and letting something sink in, starting to travel in memory, and then asking questions and seeing new answers, and envisioning a new self, and wondering if the full spirit of who you might be will stand up and be present. Can you become someone other than who you are now? There was only one thing I was doing regularly. I was having my second cup of coffee in the morning, sitting in a wing chair with the Valley News. I did the Sudoku and then the crossword. This was relaxing and I felt settled when I'd finished. It led to doodling in the margins of the newspaper, first just drawing squiggly figures, then beginning to scribble some questions. I enjoyed this and in the evening allowed it to happen again. I moved to a different chair with a pen and pad of paper to see what might arise. As a psychotherapist, I'd been trained to understand that if we are quiet enough and able to make the time and willing to stop mandating what we want, an inner voice will sometimes arrive that wants to tell us something we need to hear. That inner voice came to me in the form of poems. I wrote more than 100. As the pandemic wore on, they raised questions about mortality and the universe and my relationship to these things. Here is an early one that speaks of bleakness. My husband has died and I'm learning to live without him. No more conversation at breakfast, no making plans for the day, no reading next to each other in bed at night and falling asleep together. I reread the letters of condolence yesterday. They've been in a drawer for a year. Reading them was almost unbearable. I saw how much he had been loved. Another, a week later, reflects on how I was spending my time. I don't want to live the way I've been living anymore, driving here, driving there, a list in my hand, thinking I was free, when in fact I'd accepted without questioning some message from the culture that made me want to acquire more and more things. I didn't see the labor of others and the inequities that go into making the things I was acquiring when I was out in my car, driving here and there with a list in my hand. Another reflects on death. I'm staring at the sun, wondering how soon I can merge with it and become energy, no longer in the physical body that defines me now. I am tired. My knees don't always want to stand. I get leg cramps in the middle of the night. It is memories now that help me through the day, not activity. Energy leaves us as we age and goes somewhere else. That is where I want to go. I needed to find a new way to live, and the next poem captures the beginning of the process. I'm struggling to find a new purpose now that caring for Al is no longer the definition of who I am. When Al died, my oldest friend said she knew I'd grow new wings and do something important, not visible to the world, but important in terms of my inner life. You will grow into yourself, she said. Growing into myself was an entirely new idea. I needed allies to help me do this, and to explain the ones that arrived, I need to move away from poems for a moment and talk about what depth psychologists call the Imaginal Realm. Those of you who have read Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, know that he believed there is within us a parallel unconscious operating system that knows everything about us. Not everyone wants to know what we've buried in our unconscious, but sometimes as we get older, we become curious. Is there the potential for something we've never tried? Is there a creative streak that wasn't encouraged? Is there a hankering for something that's unfulfilled? If the answer is yes, nudgings about this may appear, often in the form of dreams. It is because, Jung said, psyche wants us to reach our full potential, and if we don't do it consciously, the unconscious will protest. Jung discovered a way to access the unconscious part of ourselves that doesn't require that we be asleep. He called it active imagination. It is a way of seeing what is bothering us. It comes as a visual metaphor or a picture. If we will simply observe it and not try to manipulate it, we may discover that it has an intention, a reason for being there. I had the good fortune in 1992 of experiencing this kind of imagery with a guide who had studied in the Navajo Nation. It was with her that I met a polar bear that changed my life. Here is a poem in which I describe what happened. A white polar bear came to me 30 years ago and tried to catch my attention. The white bear was living in the wrong habitat. It was in a meadow near a forest of oak trees and needed water. I'd asked it if I could help find the water it needed, and it said, "You are too small, but if you will stand on my right front paw and put your arms around my leg, we'll walk together to find it." I walked with the bear. We didn't find the water then, but it was my friend. It took me years to learn that the bear was an image from my unconscious telling me that I needed nourishment in my life. I realized in that instant 30 years ago that there is a treasure trove of information available to us that comes from within. The bear knew how psychologically unnourished I was when I had been pretending to myself that everything was fine. The realization led to my going to Ireland to study with Eligio Stephen Gallegos, a New Mexico psychologist who loved teaching in Ireland. He taught a healing modality called the personal totem pole process. It is based on the idea that different parts of ourselves can be associated with specific places in our body. For example, our pelvis to tell us how well-grounded we feel, how connected to our country and our people. In his modality, the image that arises is usually, though not always, of an animal. How happy or distressed it is can give us insight into ourselves. I studied with Steve Gallegos for 3 years and experienced imagery from my pelvis up through my heart and throat, all the way to my crown, the locus of our spirit. I committed myself to becoming an imagery guide and was certified. After this, I earned a master's degree in depth psychology and became a psychotherapist. I often used active imagination with my clients. Al and I moved to the Upper Valley in 2007, where I continued to have a private practice. Then, in 2011, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He died in 2018, and everything ground to a halt. I withdrew from engagement with almost everyone but my closest friends. I had just begun to emerge from grieving when the pandemic hit. My friend's comment that I would grow new wings was helpful. A few months later, a second bear arrived. There's a brown bear stirring within me. I felt it this morning when I woke up. It makes me think I've been wrong about wanting to shed my skin from outside and molt like a snake into someone new. You don't become someone new by shaking off your outer skin. You become someone new by growing a new skin within you, then standing up and shedding the loose bits and starting to walk the way you've always wanted to. My brown bear has told me her name is Emma. I didn't find it at all surprising that animals had things to say to me. James Hillman, a psychologist I'd studied, wrote about the phenomenon, which I captured in this poem. James Hillman, a Jungian analyst, tells us that we are connected to animals and that we need each other. He writes about a dreamer who dreamed of a fox. The dreamer was a person, he said, who could sometimes lie or shoplift or be excited by fire or be hard to track and hard to trap. Hillman tells us that the fox comes into a dream as a kind of teacher, a doctor animal who knows more about us than we know about ourselves. And then he says, and that's a blessing. Instead of a symptom or a character disorder, you now have a fox to live with, and you need to keep an eye on each other. One evening, taking a break from writing poems, I sat on my deck and closed my eyes and asked if there was an animal that would tell me how I should be present in the world now that I was alone. A firefly appeared. It flashed its light, then flashed it off. Will you tell me what I need to know? I asked. It said, turn your light on when you have something to say. I thanked the firefly and asked if there was something it needed from me. I need you to use my energy wisely. Don't ask me to keep my light on all the time. Then it flew away. The firefly spoke to me of my conflict about desiring to be visible. I'd spent a lot of my life concentrating on being visible. I no longer needed that. What I needed was to make sense of the time that I had left. I needed to value the detours I'd taken instead of beating up on myself for wasting time. I needed an overview. This poem describes how I did that. I will start at the beginning with the river map of my life. You too can have a river map. Take a plain sheet of paper and write freely on it the places you have lived and the years you were there. Connect them as if they were joined to each other like a stream. Your line can be curved. It doesn't need to be straight. It will be more honest if you let your hand decide where to draw. If you keep it to one page, you'll have a picture of your life as you moved from one experience to another. You will have the view that a bird might have flying overhead, looking down at all the places you've been. You will be able to see that you were always growing, even if you didn't know it at the time. I decided to see if I could construct a totem pole for today. 30 years ago, my totem pole had shown me a lobster trapped in my solar plexus, a lioness crying in my heart, a songbird in my throat that couldn't sing, an overweight kestrel in my intellect that couldn't fly because I'd weighed it down with too many serious books, and a horse that couldn't see where to take me because it was wearing blinkers. Over the years, I'd tried to provide what my images told me they needed. Steve Gallegos taught that if we nurture our imagery, we will simultaneously be nurturing ourselves, and gradually we will change. And over the years, I had tried to do that. This poem describes the solution I found. It's a sunny Sunday morning, and I've been in lockdown since March. I've decided to invite my totem pole animals to join me for breakfast. I want to know how much I've changed. I'm not going to insist on the order in which they arrive. They can stand in line if they want and bargain with each other about which should come first. I want to know if I'm still trapped in a farmyard, or hungry to be noticed, or locked in a lobster trap, or crying. I want to know if I've found my voice and if I'm now okay. The first to arrive is a hedgehog. It's on its hind feet on the passenger seat of my car and wants to know where we're going. It is jumping higher and higher, wanting to see over the dashboard. It turns to me and grins. We had an imaginal conversation with each other, which this poem describes. Hedgehog and I chat merrily. It's not that he doesn't want other animals along. It's just that we're having such a good time. He is tiny, curious, full of energy. I ask if he remembers Freedom, the workhorse in the farmyard in Ireland, who was wearing blinkers. Hedgehog says, Freedom was taught to stay close to home. I've come to help you be adventurous. I feel as free as a bird. I can't wait to see what's around the next corner. We drive a bit further. Turn down this road, Hedgehog says. It's going towards the water. There's someone we need to see. Here is what happened next. The someone we need to see is Smokey Bear, who came to me first at an imagery conference in Switzerland and followed me to Martha's Vineyard. He's sitting on a driftwood log next to a pond and is comfortable, even though he's waited years to see me again. You told me you wanted to save the environment, he says, greeting Hedgehog like a long-lost friend. You said you were going to work to save our habitats. This is true, I did make this promise, and then trained as a psychotherapist. I still care about where you live, I say. I know you do, Smokey says, not quite impatiently, but it's time for you to do more. Hedgehog jumps up on the driftwood to sit beside him. I look at the sandy beach and scrubby pine trees and know this isn't the perfect place for Smokey. I can sit here and wait for you a little bit longer, Smokey says, but you need to do more to save the planet. Another animal arrived, one I hadn't met before. A walrus is moving towards me, shifting her hips from side to side and using her flippers to propel herself forward. She's not in the water, she's on land. She seems perfectly content. She has long white whiskers and tiny ears and short, shiny brown fur. Her girth is huge, blubber, but not unattractive. I ask her if her girth keeps her warm. Yes, she says, I can be warm wherever I am. Does that mean I don't have to lose any more weight? I ask, aware of the culture that makes me think I have to be thin. You're fine, she says. You always were. She waddles away and moves towards the sea, but not without looking back and giving me a sign that we're friends. A wave approaches the shore and she dives under it and surfaces on the other side. I think she is my new grounding animal. She is giving me permission to be myself. As the vaccines arrived and the possibility of normal life again, I needed to be clear about how I was going to live going forward. What were the things that I cared about most? What new values did I have? What did I want in the way of friendships? How much did I need community? Was I happy living where I was, or did I want to move somewhere else? How afraid was I of dying, especially of dying alone? My final poem describes where I am today. I'm in the current of the river now, swimming with others and feeling alive, but there will come a time, soon, I sense, when I will move to the side to let the others pass. I'll explore the ledge where I find myself and see the sun that will keep me warm. The pod I swam with will be far ahead. I can watch from behind and cheer them on as they explore the delights of life. I'll find the right cause to commit myself to and try to make the world a little bit better for them. The choice I've made is to work on end-of-life issues. I think there is too much silence on the subject and too much pain and suffering. There has to be a way to bring sanity and compassion into the conversation about how we die. Many of you know that my husband, Al, used Vermont's Act 39 to choose the day he would die. Medical aid in dying is a gentle way of hastening death when doctors have given you 6 months or less to live. 11 jurisdictions have made it legal, and one of them is Vermont. I am going to work to make sure more and more Vermonters know about it and how to bring it up with their doctors, because not all doctors are willing to prescribe it. The doctors need to hear our voices. At the same time, I've been invited by a group in New Hampshire to work with them on getting the law passed in that state. The group is called the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options, and I've said yes. I will welcome hearing from any of you who would like to help. It is my hope that later in the year, we can have a convocation on the subject here at this meeting house. My many months of solitude and scribbling brought me to an awareness of how each of us can make a difference, and that it's important to figure out exactly what has the most meaning. We shouldn't wait. My message for today is that taking the time to be quiet may help you find it. Thank you.